Hello, me again. I'm back to do another little wrap up. I finished 5 more books. Let's get into it. First, I finished Aisha at Last by Uzma Jalaluddin. This was the Down Memory Jane book for April, and I listened to it in the first couple of days of the month, and I loved it. Down Memory Jane is a project hosted by a bunch of cool booktubers that I'm going to link below, and basically every month we alternate between reading a Jane Austen book and a Jane Austen retelling. If you haven't heard me talk about this yet, it's been cool. I had only read one Jane Austen book before this year, so I'm excited to be reading all of them. Anyway, so this book is a Pride and Prejudice retelling. That's how it is kind of pitched. And I think that was really solid in some aspects, but in other aspects, it could really stand up as its own book. And it didn't follow the Pride and Prejudice model as directly as the book that we were supposed to have read in February, Pride, by E.B. Zaboy did to me. I didn't finish that, so I don't know. But it didn't have all the characters, and it didn't have all of the plot points, but there was definitely like things that you recognized, or I recognized, about the story. And yeah, I thought it was a great retelling, and I also think that it would absolutely stand up on its own if you've never read Pride and Prejudice or you don't like Pride and Prejudice. So Aisha at Last is set in Toronto within a fairly traditional Muslim community, I guess. I am not part of a Muslim community, I can't speak to that, but they have what I believe to be like kind of traditional values. Specifically, arranged marriages are commonplace throughout this specific community. There's also a lot of discussions of like modesty and like for women, like their moms just want to see them settled with a good husband. And I think that really allows it to translate Pride and Prejudice very well, because it's got some of those like themes of, not themes, but like, I don't know, rules. There's lots of rules about conduct, right? Not too many, but whatever. So Aisha is a young woman. She is living with her family. She is too old to not be married, kind of. She wants to be a poet. She's very outspoken, and so none of the moms within this community want her for a daughter-in-law, basically. And she's kind of like, that's fine. I'm gonna do my own thing. I don't want an arranged marriage. Whatever. And her family's like, you need someone to support you, etc., etc. You can't, whatever. And then we also are following Khalid, who is a young man of marrying age, and he is very devout. There are big themes of prejudice in this, also pride, but big time prejudice for Khalid, especially at work. He's got a seriously Islamophobic, xenophobic boss. Yeah. And so the story is told from both perspectives. Obviously these two characters meet. They are the translation of Darcy and Lizzie Bennet. And they have an encounter where Khalid comes off as rude to Aisha, and she comes off as like rude in a different way. And so they, don't like each other, but then they're thrown together, blah, blah, blah. There's side plots, drama, family drama. It's heavy in this. Amazing. I listened to this as an audiobook. I think the audiobook was great. It was really fun. And I was on the edge of my seat for a lot of it. Like, I was repeatedly had to stop what I was doing to tell Connor what was happening, because I was so shocked and upset and riled up. Even though I knew what the general plot was, there was still plenty of things to surprise me and keep me engaged and activated. So yeah, that was really successful to me. It was a great book. And if you love Pride and Prejudice, maybe you should give it a try. Up next, Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. So this is the sequel to Assassin's Apprentice, and it was pretty good. I really loved Assassin's Apprentice, so this did let me down a little bit. There were just huge portions of plot that I didn't like. I didn't like the plot. So I just was annoyed, or I was just so certain that specific things were gonna happen that I wasn't into it. But what is it about? You might be wondering. This is a sequel, so if you've heard me talk about the first one, this is just more of that. We're following, at this point, a young man, Fitz, who is the illegitimate son of the now deceased king in waiting, and he lives in the palace. He has been trained as an assassin, but that's on the DL. He has this magical ability to communicate and bond with animals, but he's really not supposed to do that. It's a really frowned upon and despised ability in this world. And he also is working on another ability that is telepathy, basically, and trying to learn how to do that. But there's all these complications. He's got a big old crush. He's supposed to be, loyal to the king, but then he's got these other loyalties that are conflicting. There's all this mess. There's all this lying, spies, so many spies. Honestly, sick of spies. I'm sick of spies. And yeah, I just, it's tough to read a book about a 16-year-old boy and not be upset at him, because he's not making good choices. And I will admit that Robin Hobb does a really good job of giving her characters no good choices. It's a really bad situation over and over again, and there's never a good option. So in that way, do feel bad for him. But also sometimes he does stuff and I'm why? Why did you? But we did get a lot more backstory on the world's mythology, and there were new friendships and new betrayals, and the Fool was there. Everybody loves the Fool. I love the Fool too. Yeah, it was not amazing, but I did like it, and I'm still very excited to read the next and final book in this trilogy so that I can read the Live Ship Trader trilogy, which I think is supposed to be better than this one, but you need to read this one to really appreciate that one. Whatever. I'm enjoying the series. 3 stars is this was a good book, but when I sat down to make sure that I remembered what all these books were about before I started filming and look at my own Goodreads reviews to try to remember, I was kind of yeah, what happened in that? I kind of forget. So that's why it's 3 stars, because I forgot. And I knew that I would forget. I mean, that's why I gave it 3 stars, because I was I'm not going to remember this in a month. And I read this at this point, honestly, a month ago. Anyway, on to the next one. Mirrorland by Carol Johnstone. There you go, folks. This is a mystery thriller. This is about a pair of twins. A set of twins? Are they a pair? Or would that be 2 twins? Twins, Cat and Elle. Oh my god, Cat and Elle. And they grew up in this old kind of spooky house, and they had all these games that they used to play in Mirrorland, which is their name for the the basement and the the hidden cupboards and stuff, all the secrety spooky places in their old house. That's Mirrorland. They played there all the time. They had all these games and friends and whatever, and then something happened that pushed them apart. So we know from the get-go that they have not spoken in 12 years, but then Elle goes missing. So Kat, who's been living in LA, has to fly back to the UK, Scotland I think, to help figure it out. Elle's husband Ross reached out to Kat and was like, you gotta come, and she goes, and then it's this whole thing where we are trying to figure out what happened to Elle and also what happened to them as kids, because this story is sort of told back and forth, dual timeline style, where the more that we learn about Mirrorland, the more that we know that something is up, something is not good. And so we're sort of working towards understanding two different mysteries. And yeah, I didn't like it. I think I'd probably give it 3 stars, maybe less, honestly, can't remember. But I think it was a great book, but I didn't like it. I think that it had such heavy talk and emphasis on memory and like childhood imagination stuff that I don't like that kind of theme. So I did not enjoy the book, but the writing and the way that the plot moved and the twists and turns, etc., I think were all very good. It just was not something that I actually liked. Okay, next is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I'm so excited to finally talk about this book because I love it, and I have been reading it for a long time. It is told in chapters, small parts, so all of the chapters are sort of standalone essay or like short memoir or even a folk tale, so you could read any of them on their own, but I just read a few of them at a time over like 2 months. So Robin Wall Kimmerer is a biologist, environmental scientist, but she's also a member of the Potawatomi Nation. So she has this dual perspective on the natural world, and all of these essays are sort of regarding how those two perspectives can blend or not blend, link, contrast each other, which was fascinating. There are chapters about language, there are chapters about all of the ways that certain plants have been used and can still be used. There are chapters about how she, helped students to understand certain phenomena. I cannot begin to explain all the things that are contained within this book. Oh God. I have it. I didn't hold it up, but I have it. I love it. I love this. I'm so glad I read it. This made me feel so just like excited to live in the world, basically. I did learn a lot. I did have a lot of feelings about the state of the world and the state of the actual environment. But I also felt just really, I don't know, I think at the end I really did feel very optimistic about how much strain and harm has been put upon and done to the world. What a messy sentence. We've done a number on it as a species, and yet it's still here trying to support us, Like, I'm looking out the window, blue sky, the sun is shining. It's not what it used to be, but it's not dead yet, basically. Which is still not super optimistic, but I don't know, it inspired me to have an attitude of gratitude for what is still, beautiful and useful and like good outside, than just extreme despair about what isn't. Also, let me just say, I bought this directly from the publisher's website, Monarch Milkweed Editions. Cute, and it's a book, regular, but at some points I was like, oh, there's like some specks on the paper, like it hasn't been like totally bleached out or whatever. And then I was looking at the front, and Braiding Sweetgrass was printed on acid-free 100% post-consumer waste paper. Hello? Finally, right? Like literally every book should be published on recycled paper. Like the only way that recycling works is if we buy recycled products also, and in that way support the recycling infrastructure, city by city recycling programs, etc. Like that only works if there's a need for those products, and the need for those products is what's going to help strengthen and improve and streamline that infrastructure. So books should be printed on recycled paper. Like we don't need new paper for books. There's plenty of paper. Just cut it up, smush it into a new sheet, print the book on it. It's obviously more complicated than that, etc., but I just was really excited about that because I was like, oh my god, yes. So yeah, recycling feels aside, this book is also very beautifully written. I think Robin's a fantastic writer. There are so many moments of deep emotion in this book, so many parts that honestly had me tearing up, which I love. Anyway, one more book. Let's do it. The Book of Longings by Suma. It's a historical fiction, and it is the sort of the account of the life of Jesus's fictional wife, Anna. So it starts with Anna's, teen years. We get to know her, and then she meets Jesus, and eventually they get married, and it sort of is the story of their lives together. But from her perspective. I loved it. So, Anna is a poet. She wants to write. So she is lucky enough to have a wealthy father who can provide tutors and stuff for her, but because she's a woman in the year 16, she's really just supposed to get a husband, have a bunch of babies. And she doesn't want that, especially when the only person that her father can find to engage her to, who is willing to tolerate such an outspoken young wife, is this really old geezer that is like, bleh, don't like him, so gross. She's got big dreams, and she does not know how she's going to be able to have the life that she wants, where she can write and share stories, especially stories of forgotten women, stories of women that history has dismissed, buried, hurt, etc. And then she meets Jesus, who also has a lot of big ideas about how to have faith. So they get married, and it's a good story because they're both sort of giving the other freedom to sort of go big. Nice portrayal of Jesus. But it's not about him. It's about Anna. And yeah, she's a great character. Follows her for most of her life, basically. And the trouble that she gets in for being Jesus's wife. Jesus does get crucified, as I'm sure you know, and that scene was destroyed me, and I've never felt destroyed about that before, really. For me, what I really liked was the way that each of them was sort of interrogating spirituality and faith, and what is faith and how do you practice faith. And they each have a different way of practicing, but I don't know, especially Anna's views on God, I just really liked. I don't think that they're traditional. I don't practice a religion. I was not raised in the church. I am not very familiar with the Bible, so there might have been side characters and side plots within this story that I just missed because I didn't know the canon. I thought it was a beautiful story. I thought it was beautifully written, and I really liked having a a reading experience that encouraged me to sort of consider my own spirituality, my own faith, in like a way that I hadn't before. I just feel like this came at a good time for me because it sort of reignited my desire to think about spirituality and faith and the overarching connectedness of the world. Like, that's stuff that I used to think and talk a lot about with the people around me. And now that I'm not always around those people and I'm, you know, just thinking about different stuff, generally my life is very different than it was a year ago. So I'm just glad to have this whole conversation brought back into my life. Does that make sense? Anyway, I thought it was fantastic. I was worried that it would be weird, but it was actually just very good. So there you go. I hope that you heard something that you liked. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. And stick around if you want to hear about the next 5 books that I read. I will see you later. Goodbye.